During the 8th generation, Sony pretty much dominated the market with a line of amazing exclusives. They didn't just win, they set a whole new standard for what video games could be. Back then, PlayStation stood for quality, bold ideas and top-tier storytelling. But now that we're a few years into the 9th generation, things aren't looking quite as bright. The exclusives have become more rare. Instead of pushing new ideas, Sony's been leaning on remasters. The focus has shifted from making unique, memorable experiences to live service games and long-term monetization. Yeah, Sony is still selling well. The PlayStation is still super popular, but compared to the last generation, they haven't really kept up the same level of performance. In 2019, they revealed the PS5. Honestly, the launch went way better than Xbox's. On day one, players could jump into games like Spider-Man Miles Morales, Demon's Souls Remake, and even Astro's Playroom, which came pre-installed on the console for free. One of Sony's strategies for this generation was to offer features and advantages exclusive to their next-gen console. So naturally, people expected the PS4 era to wrap up pretty quickly after the PS5 dropped. But that didn't happen. Almost all of Sony's big games, Miles Morales, Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok ended up being cross-gen. And because of that, a lot of them didn't really feel like true next-gen experiences. Still, if you look at the situation more closely, you can kinda understand where Sony was coming from. When the PS5 launched, the PS4 still had over 100 million active players, and between 2020 and 2022, there was a global shortage of components and consoles, which really hurt sales. On top of that, game development costs had shot up to around $200 million, so Sony was understandably worried they wouldn't be able to make a profit off their games. During this period, Sony did release a few titles exclusively for the PS5. Games like Ratchet & Clank, Rift Apart and Returnal. The whole point of Ratchet & Clank was to show off the PS5's SSD power, and yeah, they pulled it off technically, but in the end, it was still a pretty basic platformer. Returnal, on the other hand, got a lot of praise from critics, but it was a very specific type of game, so not everyone really clicked with it. Some policies can mess things up fast. Instead of strengthening the brand's identity, they end up confusing people and creating a gap between the company and its fanbase. One of those decisions was the sudden shift in focus, from story-driven cinematic games to live service titles. In 2022, Jim Ryan said in an interview that PlayStation was planning to release 12 live service games by 2026. And that statement really shocked a lot of fans. PlayStation had always been known for its deep story-driven experiences, and now it was talking about jumping into the live service scene, trying to make games like Fortnite and Destiny. In that same interview, Jim Ryan said that live service games were a good model for the industry because they kept players engaged over time, and he made it clear that this direction was here to stay. Later, in a meeting with investors, he confirmed that Sony planned to turn a significant portion of its existing AAA titles into live service games. They started creating new studios specifically for live service games, and they even bought Bungie, the studio behind Destiny. All of that showed they were dead serious about going all in on this new direction. But what seemed like a bold, ambitious strategy on the surface quickly turned into a string of risky moves and disappointing outcomes. A bunch of Sony's live service projects either got delayed or cancelled altogether. Even Bungie, who was supposed to be a key part of this plan, ended up reviewing several of these projects and basically said they didn't see long-term success in them. One of the cancelled projects was actually a God of War live service game being developed by Blueprint Studios. It had been in the works since 2022 but got officially cancelled in January 2025. Then there was a sci-fi game from Bend Studio and online Twisted Metal by Fire Sprite. The Last of Us Factions, which had been in development since 2020, and Spider-Man: The Great Web, a GTA Online style multiplayer game that had been in development since 2019. There was also an unnamed online game from the Deviation Games, but the entire studio was shut down in 2024. Bungie also had a live service project that got cancelled the same year. And finally, there was a fantasy online game from PlayStation's London studio which had been in development since 2022 but got cancelled in February 2024, right before the studio was shut down completely. As you can see, PlayStation had more than 9 live service games in development, and almost all of them ended up getting cancelled after years of work. Internal playtests gave negative feedback. Development took too long. There was lack of innovation, and the cost of maintaining these kinds of games just wasn't sustainable. What's wild is that despite all this, Sony is still working on a few live service titles. There is Marathon by Bungie, Fair Game from Haven Studio, and even a freaking Horizon MMO that's somehow still in development. It's especially strange when studios like Naughty Dog and Insomniac, knowing for their single-player masterpieces, were suddenly pushed to work on live service games. That move never really made sense, and even with Bungie trying to support those projects, nothing came out of it. In the end, most of those games just got quietly shut down. Now, to be fair, Sony did release 2 live service games during this time. One of them was Helldivers 2, which honestly has been their most successful live service title so far. But then there was fucking Concord. That game turned into one of the worst disasters in PlayStation history. The servers got shut down just 2 weeks after the launch, and the studio behind it was shut down too. These live service games were getting massive budgets. It's been reported that The Last of Us Factions had a budget somewhere between $100 to $150 million. And Concord, that game reportedly had a $400 fucking million budget. All of this just proves one thing. Live service games are risky as hell. Not everyone can pull them off, and not everyone can make money from them. Sony's goal was simple: take their big franchises, turn them into live service titles, and cash in. But in the process, they slowed down the release of the kind of high quality story driven games that made the PS4 era so great. Another one of Sony's awful decisions was only unnecessary remasters and remakes of games that weren't even that old. It's pretty obvious they did this just to avoid the financial risk of developing new games from scratch, or maybe just to keep studios busy while they wasted time chasing live service projects. In the past few years, we've got an Uncharted Legacy of Thieves, Spider-Man Remastered, The Last of Us Part 1 Remake, The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered, and now they're working on fucking Days Gone Remastered. Yep, freaking Days Gone, a game they didn't even greenlight a sequel for. What's hilarious is that no one asked for these remasters. Fans have been begging for a Bloodborne remaster for years, or a God of War remake of the original trilogy, or even other forgotten classics. But Sony ignored all of that and chose to remaster games that didn't need it at all. It's been about 5 years since the start of the 9th console generation, and if we compare this period to the first 5 years of PS4 era, the difference is huge. Back then, we got Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, God of War, Spider-Man and Horizon. But in this gen, Sony has drifted far from what made it great. Sure, games like Spider-Man 2 and us were really solid, but they're not enough to make this generation feel special or memorable. And now we're in 2025 with Ghost of Yotei on the horizon. It's shaping up to be a big year for gaming overall, but Sony's role in that picture still feels shaky. If PlayStation wants to get back on top, it needs to go back to what made it special in the first place, and letting its most talented studios do what they do best. It's not too late, but the clock is definitely ticking.